So, good morning again, ladies, and welcome to part 2 of the Seascapes course. So today we're going to look at some of the work that you've already done and talk through that. And then I'm going to show you how you can finish off the painting, because we didn't completely finish it last week. There are some shadows and some more techniques to put in once this is dry. And I think my painting is now dry. So we can move on to that. So I'm going to start by just looking at one of the questions, which was we're talking to with Jill about why does my composition not look exactly like yours? It might be to do with the proportions. I brought this ruler to measure it up, and this is something you can both do on your paintings, is to put a ruler on it, because although there seems to be a lot of beach here, this is 12 inches altogether. It's only 3 inches to the bottom of the windbreak and about 4.5 to the top of the windbreak. So that's not as big an area of sand as you think. And the sea, the horizon, my horizon is about 7.5 inches up, and it comes down to 5.5. So at the very deepest, to the blue bit of wet beach there, it's 2 inches. So it's 2, and then about 1 inch to the top of the windbreak, and then 3 inches below. So it might help you. I'm putting these on the recording, so you've got these measurements if you want to go and have a look later. The other thing that we're looking at was how big should the sand dune be? Not very big. The sand dune here is maximum 2 inches at the very tallest bit of my dune. And you may find that yours is, if your sand dune is right up here and you put your windbreak up here, therefore everything's moved up, and suddenly you've got this massive empty beach that doesn't quite work. So this was to try and help you think about, when you start, getting the composition right. Take your time, wipe it off, draw it on 4 times before you start. So that hopefully will help you have a look at your own work and sort of analyze it a bit. And then we're going to look at, I'm just going to have a share, because we're going to look at the photos that share screen. And if I go to this one, hopefully, we just take that off. Do we take that off? How do we take that off? No, I don't want to do that. Just wanted to take this ruler line off. Give us a bit more image. I'm not sure how I can do that. There it is. There, that's it. Get rid of that. Close that. So we've got. So these were your 4 stages, which you kindly sent in to me, Jill, and you can see immediately that your sand dunes are too big. Yeah. And your windbreak has shot up to almost. In fact, your windbreak's almost on the halfway line. So sadly, this first stage is where you made the mistake. Yeah. What you could do, if that's on board, is you could actually take a couple of inches below the sand dune, and you could cut the bottom inch and a half of your board off, if it's a board rather than a stretched canvas, and that would change the perspective of it.
Yeah, it is a canvas, so I can't. Oh, it's a canvas.
Well, okay, we can't do that. Yeah. But you can see even more here. It's just, you've just gone mad with the sand dunes. Yes, yes. And consequently, everything else is actually in proportion, except the bottom. Yeah, if you get a piece of paper and just block off the bottom.
I think too, when I redid the video, yeah. If when I rewound the video, you said put the sea down to about 1/3 of the canvas, and I remember thinking at the time, oh, that seems right an awful lot. And then I thought that meant for the bottom bit where there's that kind of stream.
No, that's where the horizon needs to go.
I kind of misinterpreted it all, I think, but then I didn't.
Yeah, because even when you see the top, yes, your horizon, you'll see.
The sand dunes are way too big. I just kind of carried on.
Yeah, your horizon your horizon needs to be more or less on the line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because you've had to put a lot more grasses on your sand dunes to fill them up.
Yes.
Than I have.
Exactly.
If we look at yours and we look at mine, then you can see the difference.
Yes.
And then when you come down to this bottom one, you've added more figures to fill in. Oh, I see. You've added figures above the windbreak to fill in the gap and make it very busy. To be perfectly honest with you, it's working.
I decided I could do figures that are very small at the distance, but
yeah. Okay. Bigger figures are more difficult, and I never do a figure more than about an inch and a half tall anyway.
No,
because they're too much.
Yeah.
So I think what you've got here is the figures have worked pretty well for you.
Yeah, I'm quite pleased.
Yeah, it's a compositional shape. Take your time a bit more in the. I wouldn't normally put a horizon higher than about a third from the top. I think once you get really high, unless it's all about looking down a valley and it's nothing to do with the sky, that does look. You need a bit of sky in most scenes. What I would say as well is your windbreak is it's all the same angle. I think it would fall down. If we go back, if I do stop share, then you come back to mine. I mean, mine isn't. Mine should go. It perhaps should go up and down and as though it's pinned. So some panels need to be. I haven't done it very well here either. Need to be sort of smaller and wider, and they're not small. It's just that they're at more of an angle. Because if you actually set it up dead straight in a row, the chances are the wind will go one bush of wind and it'll blow it over. So when you're painting them, they're a little bit, yes, they're a little bit flat. And we did add a few extra little red stripes. And if you go back to screen share, then you go back to this one. Yes, I think you could be brave and put some more pattern. But you see what I mean? Each line is straight.
Yes. So it looks as if it's going down a hill.
It does look as if. Have a look at some photos of beaches. Go on West Wittering Beach website and look at some windbreaks, because it's not something that we use very much. Sort of, and it can be tricky to paint. I think you've done a really good job. I think so far there's a lot. You asked me a little bit about the purple and the green for the distant hill, and the short answer is I use both. Stop share. In fact, mine's more purple, but I tend to, and I didn't do it very well. Sometimes have a little bit of green or light along the very bottom, and then I would say any of the green colour tends to go along the top of the cliff, and the more purpley colour for the main colour of the cliff.
Okay.
It's just that those two colours are usually a good starting point.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, but and you can use them the way you like. I mean, it depends on what you're painting, but it's sort of I thought that would be those would be good base colours for you. My bench is looking a bit emptier now because I haven't got as many fingers as you. Now, the final thing that you said about this, and then I'm going to turn to Carolyn and see if she's got any questions for me. We've got the dark blue out to sea, coming to the mid blue, coming to much paler, so it's dark getting lighter towards the shore, because the water's getting shallower, and at the shoreline it's sometimes it's almost yellowy because it's just all you can see is sand with a bit of wetness on it. Okay, now I know that we said slightly darker sand getting lighter, and you might say that sounds like it's the wrong way around. Well, this painting is not finished. I'm going to show you how to finish it in a minute. The part of the reason I was slightly darker sand here is I wanted us to have very light area for the dunes, and that to come forward. So I needed that to be a little bit darker. And actually, where the sand is drying in the distance, it's often very pale. But of course, it's not all drying because the sea's coming in. There's some wet bit now, and you're quite right. Where the sea comes in over the sand, it goes darker. Now, we can either paint it darker in the first place, or we can mix up some shadow glaze to put on top to make it darker. And that's what I was going to show you how to do, both on the sea here, and then we've got some shadow to put in here and shadows to put in, and to alter the tones, because we decided that these sand dunes were generally overall a little bit on the light side.
Yeah.
So today's sort of lesson is all about how to use the glazes to finish off your painting. And there's not a huge amount of work, but I've set out my paints over here. And what I've got in this pot, there's a gloop, which looks pretty disgusting. And I've got a brush. I might even need a softer, actually, a watercolor brush would be quite useful. I've got a soft one, yeah, I've got a soft one here. One of these brushes, sort of soft watercolor brush. In here is my, and it's quite thick. This, I poured out some Alkyd medium. Mine's not called Winsor & Newton's liquid. It's called Melanie Cambridge Alkyd medium, which we made years ago, and it's about the only pot I've got left of it. It's the same sort of stuff.
Is this the same as the liquid? Is this the same? Yeah.
Yes, it is the same as the liquid. It's just that it's made by a friend of mine who's a colour chemist. So it's, yes, when I've used that bottle up, then I'll need to go and buy some liquid from Winsor & Newton. But I put some in the pot and I put it on here, so you can see it's pretty see-through. Mine's a little bit browner than, sometimes it goes a bit light. So that's the glazing medium, and that is basically turpentine, spirit, and Alkyd, which is the fast drying bit of it. I just realised my plug has come out, my laptop. That's better. So that's what we're going to use. Now, if you put that on clear, it would just dry clear and glossy, so it'd be a bit useless. So what I want to do is mix a shadow colour initially for the sand, for the wet sand. We're going to start with the wet sand, then we're going to do the shadows, then we'll do the shadows on the beach. Now, for the wet sand, I really want a bit of purple, but I want quite a bluey purple, and that's going to have too much red in it. Yeah, it's got way too much red in it, so there's more blue in it. So I'm going to use the ultramarine blue and my magenta. There's quite a bit there. I don't know how dark this is. This looks very dark. Add a lot of the gloop. I'm going to add all that gloop. Now this might still be a bit dark, but I'm going to give it a go, because if it's got a lot of Alkyd medium in it, then it's very see-through. So I'm just going to take a bit of this mauve colour. You can add white, but when you add white, it goes more opaque. So I really want it just to be colour, thin amount of colour, and the Alkyd medium. So let's go and have a look on the painting and see what we can do with it. Because along here, along this water line, I'm going to put a thin layer of this mauve. I'm just wondering if it needs to come further in with the camera. What I'm doing is I'm just putting some wetness on that bit of beach. And because I'm adding purple over the top of the yellow, keep it fairly wet, it's not really showing up on here. It's showing up quite well on the, come in, bring a bit nearer.
Oh yes, that's good, yes.
Can you see it? It's quite subtle. It's not dark purple. It's just, what it does is it just picks up and makes a bit of shadow on the beach. I mean, mine is, I exaggerate mine a bit, because if I don't exaggerate it, you're not going to see it. So along here, perhaps where it's wet, and maybe along there, I'll try and put some darkness into the water. Maybe just, I'll do it a little bit stronger, because I think it'll show up better on the actual film, and it doesn't really matter on the picture. There. So along there, that's where my beach is going to be wetter. And I prefer to do this than painting it dark, because it gives it, you've got control. I've only put one layer on, and we can let that dry, and then you can put another layer on. So if I've got a little bit of wetness here, I could put it where the figures are. I might just go through there with a bit of purple and just give that a little bit of a pool of wetness there. Showing up a bit too much, it's a bit of a sharp edge. You need a soft brush to be doing this. And that is quite a subtle effect. I mean, I'll bring the camera in, let's just bring it a bit closer again so you can see it. Can you see what's happening? It looks a little bit, it looks a bit dodgy on the camera actually, but it's sort of giving you because you're putting a mauve over the top of a yellow, and because the mauve is complementary to the yellow, it should just turn it to more of a shadow colour, rather than, because they're cancelling each other out, rather than it being rather than you paint. If you painted it solid, even with thin paint, the rest of it won't show through. Now, if I take this mauve and I'll make it a little bit dark, I'm just going to make it a bit stronger. I'm just bear with me a second. I'm just adding a tiny bit more pigment. So it's still ultramarine and magenta is what I'm using. This will be more interesting on this bit. I'm just going to zoom this camera in a bit, I think, because I think it would help. Just bear with me a second while we do that. Exit full screen. Go into them. Come on. Just zoom it in a bit more. That's better. That's probably better. Are we still in focus?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, good. Let's go back to, we're not on screen share. Where's my zoom gone? I've lost my zoom. Oh God. This technology, it's so bad. That should have, yeah, that's zoomed it in a bit now, isn't it? Because what I want to do here is paint over this windbreak. There, maybe even there. You can put a bit of shadow over the windbreak. Can you see?
Very nice, yes. Yeah.
Clever, isn't it? So you can do that, and there might even be, you know, if you wanted any other shadow. I mean, I'll do a bit of shadow on here just to show you. You can just go across there. You could have that side of the windbreak had a shadow on it to put a crease on it. You know, you could make it look like it's got little creases on it. And then of course, and this is using this is a technique. It doesn't take long to show you, but it's a brilliant technique because obviously underneath here, you know, you would think, well, wait, hang on a minute. This is all going to be, I'm just going to work this out. It's about there, that area there, and here is all going to be more or less the shadow of the windbreak, isn't it? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, you've got little ideas. You can put a little bit of shadow on that figure as well if you wanted to. I mean, you can go mad with this, and obviously you can spoil it, you know. But the thing is, it's showing you what you can do. And if your shadow isn't really dark enough, it's almost preferable to do it once and leave it, and then have another go. And it's obvious that this girl needs to have dark on there, because if the sun is coming over here from this direction, then this arm and this t-shirt would be in shadow, and I don't want to have to repaint it. So all I do is I'll give her a little bit of a purple wash over the top to pull the shadow onto her. Now that's quite pale shadow, and you might say, well, I want it darker than that. But I'm quite happy with that. Well, if you want it darker than that, you either mix it up darker to start with less of the liquid or the alkyd medium, but preferably I would do 2 coats. I'd do it and I'd leave it for a day, and then I'd come back to it, because I think you get a more subtle effect.
Can you tell me more about the brush? Because I don't have a brush like that.
This is sorry. This is a number 7 round watercolor brush, okay, from the range of brushes that I have. You could do it with putting this glaze on. It is easier with a soft nylon brush. I'll pick another. We've got another one here, a dry one. It's a bit dirty. Oh, that's not so good. That's got a bit. You can see it's quite a. It's a softer brush. Right. It's a standard nylon brush. I mean, yes, obviously you can buy one of mine. I can send you one. But I would assume. Do you not paint any watercolor? I thought everybody did watercolor.
No, I've never done watercolor.
Oh, good. Don't try. It takes people years to break away from it.
I've heard that, yes. I think doing oils is going to be hard enough.
It's a soft nylon brush, but
okay,
this is the only thing I would use. You could almost go to a craft shop and just get yourself a fairly cheap one, but the trouble is you won't get the point on it.
No. So you couldn't use your round brush, the small.
You could. I would use your round brush, because that is exactly the same hair. It's just smaller, and I just picked this up because it's okay, a bigger brush. But yes, you could easily use your round brush.
Yeah. Okay.
For that. Right. In fact, do you want me to show? Let's see how we get on with the smaller round brush. Actually, haven't got anything like that. Okay, so I'm loading the same stuff, but I'm using the smaller brush, same brush. Because again, when you come to do this, I'm thinking I want to put some shadow effect on this figure and on that. I've got some shadow effect on them already, but I'm feeling that it's not in it's. I want to make them a bit dark, maybe make that head a bit darker and they're a bit darker. And then you realise just how stupidly light these sand dunes are. I love the lightness, but I put shadow in there and it's nowhere near enough. It needs to be quite a lot darker. It probably needs to be bluer rather than purple as well. Well, I don't know. That's putting purple over the top. I'm adding a little bit more ultramarine blue, and I'm going to mix a different glaze. Let's just switch back to the mixing and I'll show you what we're doing here, because this is the glaze, but I'm going to take some pure stuff, start again. That's got a bit of a lump in it. Start again, and I'm going to take some ultramarine blue, very little blue, so it's still very see-through, and then a tiny bit of my burnt sienna. That's almost too much burnt sienna, to get more of a sort of grey colour, colder grey, because we've used blue and the brown rather than blue and magenta. So this is a different colour, and when it goes on the camera, hopefully you'll see a difference. Hopefully you'll see a difference. If I go over here, yes, that is actually more of a grey there. It's more like the grey of this chap, only not quite so dark. So I'm going to make that a bit darker. And because I think the grasses need a bit dark, I'm actually going to put a bit of glaze over the base of the grasses, just a little bit, and down here as well, and anchor it in so that we've got. So it's like you're like painting, but where you're painting over things, the brush marks are all still showing through, which is quite nice. And finally, I think a little bit on here. These are small tweaks that you can do, but they'll make a big difference to your painting. And it brings it all to life. I've got a few.
It's good.
You can see that this is a soft technique, but in fact, I think you can probably see now that's quite purpley and that's more grey. And in fact, I'm going to leave them differently. I don't have a problem with that. And, oh dear, I've just splodged the dog. Hang on, we've just put a splodge of, just rub it off. Because the canvas is dry, you just rub it off. You know, and you might go back and say, well, hang on a minute, that figure might need a bit of shadow, but the shadow I used was purple. So it's a good job I haven't wiped up my purple glaze, and I'll just give her a little bit of a shadow coming off there, perhaps. And again, she needs a bit of shadow on her back because she wouldn't be that white, would she? If you think about it. The back of her would be a bit darker. So you can see how it's possible to do quite a lot of altering of this picture just with a few tweaks and the use of a glazing medium rather than using solid paint. Let's just see if I'll just bring this back out again now so we can have a look at. Sorry, it takes me a second. You have to use the software. I've not worked out how to do this at the same time. That'll do. Back to there. Back to there. And then drop that down an inch. So we've got pretty much the whole picture. And can you see, that just helps bring it to life.
It's good.
Yes, adds depth, doesn't it?
It adds a lot of depth. And
yes.
I find if you do this, you know, most of your painting in one wet and then have a go and add a bit of depth at the end. I mean, in fact, I'm going to go back up a bit. See those dunes now, I think they look brilliant. And it's the fact that I've gone over there with the dark blue, the bluey grey. So there are two glazes to make. One is magenta and ultramarine, and the other is ultramarine and burnt sienna. But in neither of those do I add any white. If you add white to those mixes, you get a very pale mist colour, which is quite handy when you think that this is a bit dark for me. So I'm going to show you how to make that lighter. You might not need to, but this lesson today is all about the final tweaks that you can do on your painting to make it come to life. So I'm just going to show you, we just go back to what I've already mixed, which is that one. I've got the grey one. I know it's not very easy to see. I don't know if you tip it up. Is it any easier to see? Or
it's fine. Yeah.
Better?
It's fine. Thank you.
Okay. But that's the ultramarine and burnt sienna. This is the ultramarine and magenta. Now, if I take the misty one, this grey one, and I add a bit of white into them, got the wrong brush. Where's my brush gone? It's here. Just take a bit of white into here and a bit more gloop. And what I want to mix is it needs to be fairly thin, but I want to mix a pale grey rather than the darker grey, and that has got white in it, so it's more opaque. You have to be careful with this, because if you make it too solid, you just paint out what you've done. You think, oh, I wanted to make it paler, and actually you don't make it paler. You end up making it completely painted out. Because what I want to do now is go over this, and I might have to bring it in a bit, but I just go over it. And you're adjusting things all the time. You're not going to get it perfect first time. I think it's good in a way if you haven't done much watercolor, because watercolor expects you to be perfect first time. Whereas, and a lot of people get very hung up on, oh, the paper's really expensive and I've got to get it right, I've got to do my perfect drawing. Whereas with oils, you slap it on and scrape it off again. And you don't worry too much about it. I'm just trying to I put in a couple of layers on here, and it is actually going a little bit lighter. It's just softening it down in the mist. If I put that on the white, you can see there that it is putting a grey. That's the colour I'm adding on top of my hill or my distant cliffs to make them a little bit, just a little bit softer. Because quite often, the one bit that's really hard to judge in a painting are the distant hills. That's the bit that you tend to get wrong. I tell you what, wasn't it important to put a couple of extra marks inside my windbreak?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, it's flapping in the wind now. I would say that little bit of shadow, this could be a little bit darker down. I might even take a little bit more purple and just darken that up a bit, and maybe even take that to the edge of the painting there. I think maybe just put a little bit of dark in there to be careful, because that angle's going that way, so that should go that way a little bit, and that goes that way. Now I'm fuddling it. I'm fussing it now. Leave the damn thing alone, you'll spoil it. You can do too much. But you see, I don't really need to do any more to that.
No.
Because to be honest, anything else I'm adding, I'm just going to spoil. I mean, I could take some white. I could take some little white, and I could do the old inherent little sort of, we could just put 3 or 4 boats going over there. You just put some little tiny tick marks, but you don't do too much. I don't do a hull. All I've done, and I'll show you on the big screen here. I'll wipe it off again. But what I've actually done is I've just done that and that for a sail, and that is all I've done. I haven't done it. Sometimes I'll put a dot and sometimes I won't. But when you're painting boats on the horizon like that, and we need to just wipe this off now. We don't really want these blobs here, do we? Let's just wipe that off. I'm just going to put a white patch on. Just get a bit of, just to clean this off carefully, and dip in a bit of paper into my, I'm only using white spirit. I mean, you might be using Zest It. Just gently wipe it and then just take the excess off. There we are. And we pretty much wiped that off. You wouldn't normally do that on your painting, but I've done it on mine. There we are.
Can I ask you,
sorry.
So with the glazes, does it have to be on a dry painting?
Yes, you've got to do it on a dry surface.
All in one go.
If your painting is wet, it will just mix and stick with the underlying layer and it won't work.
Okay. Yeah.
That's why, particularly with the windbreak and the shadows, there's no way I could have done them last week. And all of a sudden we've gone from having a big blank empty space to having to having some sort of the beach feels fairly full, because we've just put this darker line of shadow. I added a bit of extra purple line there. You could, if you wanted to, you could do this and you could add a few little dots here of the shadow with us, and you will need the small brush for this. But if I do that and do a few little dots and dashes in there, that would read, hopefully, as churned up sand that somebody's walked through. See, they're all little tricks. You wouldn't put that effect up here because that far away you wouldn't see it, but down here you might. And again, you could put that with solid paint, but I find that it's quite useful these days. I mean, I used to teach a lot of get it all done in just one hit. Well, I think it's better if you get it all done in 2 hits. If you do all the technique that you can do wet in wet the first time around and get the canvas completely covered, even if it looks a bit bright and it's not quite subtle enough, and then use the glazes and maybe a little bit more paint in a second stage to bring it all together. So that
Melanie, does the medium add a sheen? Does it sort of add a sheen to the oil paint?
Yes, and the problem is it will dry slightly glossy, or it can dry slightly glossy. And the problem you've got then, I've just realised that needs to go over there. Problem you've got then is that you've got glossy areas and you've got matte parts in your painting. And in fact, even if you don't use these mediums, sometimes some colours will dry a slightly silky finish and other colours will dry matte. They that's called sinking. They sink into the paint. And what you must do when you've finished your painting and it's complete, and I'm just looking to see if I've got the jar with me, and I don't think I have got the jar with me. Oh yes, I have. Yes, I can put it on the screen. What you need is some of that.
What's that?
Which is artists. I don't know if you can see it from there. Can you bring it there again? Artist retouching varnish. Now, I would always recommend that you only ever use artist retouching varnish. If it just says artist gloss or artist matte varnish, then that varnish will seal the surface completely and you can never paint over it. Whereas this is much gentler. It doesn't seal the surface. You can actually, what we've been doing with the glazes, you could have mixed the colours with the varnish and put coloured varnish areas on. Instead, you could use it like a glaze because it's a work in progress product. But I use a big soft brush or a flat brush, or you can buy a varnishing brush, and I will go over the whole painting. I lay it down flat, go over the whole painting, usually fairly systematically, going across and maybe down. I don't scrub it. I just go neatly one way and then possibly the other way, fairly quickly. And as you do that, all the colours, the darker colours, sort of get brighter. It's really nice. It's very satisfying varnishing paintings. It's a nice thing to do. And then when it's dry, you'll get a silk finish over everything. Not a super glossy finish, but you will get a slightly silk sheen. So I hope you've enjoyed the second part of this course. Here are a couple of my other seascapes to give you a bit of inspiration, and look forward to seeing you perhaps on another course at some stage in the future. There will also be some free lessons, including how to clean your brushes, on my website. If you head over there and check out the online learning page is where you'll find all the videos.